thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. It was a really interesting invitation, I think, from Wendy in particular, to sort of reflect a little bit on insights into trying to set up research collaborations. So I'll take a slightly different view and talk about a few general projects rather than the outputs of those. So I'm based at Imperial. This is a picture of where I work in the blue building here. And I'll talk a little bit towards the end about a particular project the university is starting in Ghana, which I think has been informed by our experiences over the years. So, these are my own experiences in terms of large-scale collaboration in hepatitis. And I suppose the first thing to say is that there are a few things not on this list. So obviously some things don't get funded and then you forget about them and you move on. So I don't want to give the impression that this is all very straightforward. But generally speaking, things that get funded are things that have got a very clear question that people are interested in, that you've got a very clear team where the roles of that team are really, really very clear. But the thing that often people forget is about the timeliness and the urgency of the question you're looking at and asking the why now question for funders. And I suppose my own journey in this started back 20 years ago, really. So I've been working in South Africa for a couple of years and getting increasingly frustrated in the context of a TB HIV program about not being able to do anything about hepatitis. And so when I got back to London, I was very keen to have hepatitis as a focus for my own work. And then it was really a combination of luck and opportunism that got us our first grant. So I was working with Mark Thurs in those days, and there was a call from the EU. So the first lesson is if you want to get research funding, write the grant that is going to fund it. So there was a group who'd written a proposal for the EU to fund viral treatment in Africa to prevent cancer. But it was written by the human papillomavirus group, and they wanted to get funded. And so it was very much opportunism that we put in a hepatitis B project that was focused on liver cancer. And the other bit of luck was one of the reviewers was a guy called Roger Williams, who some of you will know, who was a sort of doyen of British hepatology, who also happened to have a very strong link to Nigeria and was a reviewer for the grant. And so it was complete luck that he was very positive about this, and that's what got things going. And I think this was a really great collaboration between sort of groups in Senegal, in Gambia, Nigeria at that time, and London. And actually one of our earliest recruits was Gibraltar. So, I think it's great to see Prolifica continuing, and I'm not really involved anymore, so that's even better. So it has a life of its own. And my own journey sort of moved into hepatitis C, and again in a timely way, I guess, when the new DAAs came along, and there was funding in the UK for a consortium looking at how to use these new DAAs and how they were going to be best deployed. And this was the Stratified Treatment Optimization collaboration in the UK, which was bringing together a very multidisciplinary group, so clinicians, molecular virologists, epidemiologists, modelers, health economics. That then led into strategic trials in the UK looking at shorter course treatment in particular, which was very fruitful, but also benefited from being timely. And I think others in this room were involved. Jeff in particular was part of that. And that led to a global collaboration in Southeast Asia, which has been running for 10 years. And I think one of the other lessons of things is that it takes time if you do big collaborations and you're trying to do big projects. So from conception to some of the outputs coming out now this year, this was 10 years of work between, again, sort of groups in the UK, in Thailand and Vietnam, again, multidisciplinary teams working together. And the main project I'm involved with currently is in the UK, looking at a networked study of acute infection, which I think is a critical part of people's work in every part of the world, and it's a good way to bring people together to understand ongoing transmission. So I don't have any particular wisdom to share, but I think that it is important when you're trying to pull these groups together that you've got a really clear goal as to what you're going to deliver at the end of it. And the clearer that can be, rather than just wanting to work together, the clearer that can be, the easier it is then to pull people in, particularly if you've got big multidisciplinary teams. Having a shared objective where everybody knows what they're contributing to that is really critical in holding things together. It's also important to work with people you like and to work with people who deliver. And I think trying to force partnerships together in a very political way sometimes works, but it often doesn't. And the more it can be ground up, and I think we've heard some really great examples of that already today, the more likely it is to succeed. And then more debatably, I think, is a question of whether a good acronym helps. I'm pretty convinced that having a good acronym is proportionate to getting funded, but not everybody agrees with me. There's some shaking of heads, but there's been long evenings in the bar on some of these acronyms. So that's some brief reflections, and we can pick up some of that in Q&A. I think this kind of work led me to another sort of large-scale collaboration, which was the Lancet Gastroenterology Hepatology Commission, asked by Rob back in about 2016, I think, to pull together this commission. And again, this was a group of like-minded, willing people, some of whom are in the room here. I think Mark, Wendy, Jeff were all involved in this. And I think this had the ambition of trying to bring together a very multidisciplinary team to deliver something that was going to be helpful to people, that was really going to try and be a state-of-the-art review of what's going on. There were some lessons from this for me. One is to try and get money to do it. Trying to do it without money is quite hard. Rob, yeah, thank you. Providing free content for Lancet Gastro Hep is all of our lives. But I was very grateful to the, to many people in this room who put a huge amount of work into this. And I think, some of the recommendations that came out of this have been quite helpful. I was reminded yesterday that one of the recommendations was the formation of the Coalition for Global Hepatitis Elimination, which has really done amazing things in a short space of time, thanks to the leadership of John and Jibril and others. One of the other recommendations or sort of themes that came out of that, which I think is relevant, was this concept of the H20, which is the fact that, as we know in this room, that 80% of the burden of global hepatitis sits in 20 countries. And if you're serious about global elimination, you've got to be serious about these 20 countries. And so when it came to do an update and a sort of review of where we'd got to in 5 years, I felt really strongly we had to have representation and partnership with people in those 20 countries to make this a meaningful piece. Now, that was a great ambition. I suppose my lesson from it was really that it's hard. And actually, it's also sobering when you think about the scale of the problem in some of these countries. To actually find somebody who's doing it and working in it in some countries was actually quite difficult, let alone trying to persuade them to work for no money to write some things. And actually, I was incredibly indebted to people, the 20 people here who participated. So we sort of shifted the group that worked on the update to reflect that concept of the H20. And I think that was helpful, but with some challenges amongst it. And a couple of things that became issues during the writing. So one thing was that Russia invaded Ukraine, and two of the most heavily burdened countries were Russia and Ukraine. So challenges of whether they would work together was one thing, and also whether people could actually do things was a challenge. And one group, who I won't name, actually withdrew their authorship from it for fear of being sent to jail for just being on a paper. And that was quite a sobering realization for some people working on hepatitis in some parts of this world. It's still very challenging. So just to finish, wearing my university hat, so I'm based at Imperial, which is a sort of research-driven university. And we've never had a global strategy for engagement. Some universities do. And so there was an opportunity a couple of years ago to think again about how we might do international health. And we actually now have an international strategy. But we're trying to frame that in a modern world, not least because with a name like Imperial, you have to kind of be mindful of your history and how that looks. But really the ambition of this was to think about, as a university, we want to be in the future tackling the biggest problems that face the world, and we want to be doing that in parts of the world where things are changing. And so we wanted to establish a mechanism where we could partner in a way with people who wanted to work with the university, particularly in research, but in education and other areas. And we ended up with this structure, which I think is quite different from other places, which is essentially to create 4 hubs. And you'll see from the bottom that these 4 hubs are quite different in where they are and what they do, and they all have different intention in different parts of the world. First one was in Singapore, it's very much R&D driven. Second one was in San Francisco, very much about partnering with industry and technology. And then the other 2 most recently in Bangalore and now in Accra, really trying to establish an office and a mechanism for collaboration with partners who are interested to work together. And this was launched as a legal entity in Accra earlier this year. This is a photo from the launch with some of my colleagues from Imperial and partners in Uganda, working with universities locally and other organizations, and really trying to establish those areas of shared interest where we might be able to go together and get a bit greater leverage to get funding for research projects, for example, not just about infectional hepatitis, although I'd love it if that was, so please talk to me later, but much more broad than that. So to give you some examples of the programs that are going on at the moment, there's a program in climate change and resilient cities called Clarity, funded by the Wellcome Trust. There's a program that some of you may be familiar with called Digital Diagnostics for Africa. And on Wednesday, I had a fantastic day over at the University of Ghana, going to WACPIB, which is a fantastic facility, the Noguchi Institute over there, and some of the expertise who are all involved in this program through colleagues in London. There's a thing called the Chango Hub, led by Faith Ozier, who some of you will know from Kalifi days, I think, if those of you in Kalifi, looking at how to scale up vaccine manufacture and local capacity for vaccine production in Africa. And then finally, I think, something that we didn't really expect was a really strong desire from Ghanaian partners to support developing entrepreneurs to develop new businesses and to spin out and use some of the university's background in that to try and support that. So that's become a Connecting Africa program for innovation. That's just some examples, and hopefully there'll be more in the future. But if anybody in Ghana is interested in projects and linking into the university, please do let me know, because that's the purpose of this hub. So I'll finish there, but thank you.